to welcome all you ladies, gentlemen and distinguished guests here tonight to the launch of the Miami Showband Massacre, which we're very proud to publish. I'd just like to introduce you to Father Brian Darcy, who's going to say a few words, and then he will introduce former Taoiseach Albert Reynolds, who's just behind me here. Father Darcy.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you?
Well.
There was a launch of a book last year to which Brush Shields came along to. And Brush rang me the next day and he said it was one of the best nights of his life because I said I was a bit shocked for the first 10 minutes. I thought I was in heaven because I kept meeting people I thought was dead 10 years ago. I feel a bit like that myself tonight, even though Brush is here. It's lovely to see so many of the people from the entertainment industry and others, but particularly the entertainment industry, that I haven't met for a long, long time. And some great colleagues of the Miami, and great colleagues, of course, particularly of Stephen, who are here tonight. To launch this wonderful book. I've just got my hands on it this evening, like yourselves. I haven't been able to read it, but I'm looking forward to it immensely. A few of us were talking there about the years gone by. I suppose I've been chaplain to the entertainment industry now since 1970, which is 37 years ago. I always remember the week, that last week in July, the first week in August of 1975. It was an incredibly sad week. Up until then, nothing sad ever happened in the Irish industry. We were all young, we were all bright, we were all going places, we were all on a high, and we were all, just fully enthusiastic of breaking boundaries and freedom and wonderful sense of fulfilment, giving Ireland a different image. The showband industry had come along from '54 with the Clifford Cartons and had peaked, I suppose, in the early 70s. And it had done wonderful work. I mean, you had the Royal Showband who at one stage had the wonderful pleasure of having the Beatles open for them, which is the truth. You had Elvis Presley coming in to see them in Las Vegas. These are the kind of stories you never hear. You had gigs closing on a Wednesday night because there was only 1,700 people going to them. That is the truth. A band on one occasion in Castlebar on the second night of Christmas drew 3,500 people and they were never asked back. The gig was given to Big Tom, who could draw 4. But the best advertising. And this was the kind of enthusiasm where taken Ireland from a dark age of having no electricity and no entertainment, where things were run in the parish hall. These men had come and had broken all the boundaries. At one stage in the early 1970s, late 60s, there were 600 professional show bands, fully professional show bands, touring the country. And I could go to a dance in Dublin when I was in Mount Argus in 1970 right through to 1989. But for most of that, I went to 8 or 9 dances per night in Dublin. And it was running for 7 nights a week. There was no recording industry in Ireland before the bands came along. There were pretty much no venues, but these guys were travelling jukeboxes who brought. I was never going to see Elvis Presley, but I could see him every night on stage with one band or another. And then the beat groups came, and then the other groups came. And the Miami, for some reason, were able to join all of those together. And there were a show band who became a group. And with the wonderful Fran O'Toole and the enthusiasm and talent that he had, were beginning once again to break into the writing of their own material and break new boundaries all over again. And they were the headway for fellas like Brush and Dara Doyle and the Memories and all, and Paul and Jerry and all, and the Conquerors and all of the fellas who were here tonight. They were the headliners who were breaking in. There was a great enthusiasm, there was a great rivalry, but there was also a great friendship. And it's wonderful to see them all back here tonight, and alive and happy and wonderful. Except that some of them are not alive. And that's the tragedy. That terrible week of the 29th and 31st of July 1975, which saw the death, first of all, of one of the loveliest gentlemen that ever stood on an Irish stage, or on a Vegas stage, or in Carnegie Hall, or anywhere else, because he stood on them all, and that was Tom Dunphy. He was killed on the road to a gig. as he was going to a gig. His car slid into a lorry. And you know, it's like Buddy Holly, that's the day the music died. And 2 nights, all of us, I was preparing a sermon for Tom Dunphy's funeral in Tramore in Waterford on a hot and terribly warm day. And that night, the word came through in the middle of the night about the Miami. And I was asked to go to certain houses. And I was asked to be with people and break in the news. And there were people injured, there were people dead. And suddenly, mortality struck us all on that awful night. Now, Stephen and Neil have documented in a magnificent way what actually happened that night. And you meet the face of evil. People who want to kill other people whose only job in life was to make people happy. Why would you want to kill them? Why would you want to make political footballs of people, the bands of the very people who brought people together? The only thing who kept Northern Ireland together at that time was showbands. Do you know something? When I heard that Fran O'Toole had died, that Tony Geraghty had died, and that Brian McCoy had died, and people came asking about funerals, and they said, well, you won't be able to do Brian McCoy's funeral because it will be in Church of Ireland. Do you know something? I'd known Brian McCoy for, I suppose, 10 years. I never knew that he wasn't a Catholic, or that he was a Protestant. And you know something else? I didn't care. And neither did he. We were friends. And that's what it was in the Miami. Particularly Miami. There were Northerners, there were Southerners, there were Protestants, there were Catholics, there were fresh musicians, there were young musicians, there were talented, stable musicians. They were the ultimate in the cross-section of Irish entertainment industry at the time. And somebody thought of it, that they would kill these people to make a political point. Thank God we've come some distance from that. But we should not forget the trauma. I was at the funeral of Fran, I was at the funeral of Tony, I was at the house in McCoy's, I was in the hospital with Stephen and Ray. And even still, I never got over that night. And in the years, months afterwards, when you were trying to deal with wonderful young people like Valerie and the children, Franz, and Helen and her family, and Linda Hendricks, who was Tony's girlfriend at the time, and Peter Geraghty. For years afterwards, Peter and the wife, I saw them every Sunday morning coming into Mass in Mount Argus. And every morning I knew them because of the sadness on their face. That's what violence does. And that's the awfulness of it. And that's why it's an incredible and wonderful and brave thing that Stephen and Neil have done to put the record straight so that those good men in the Miami Showband and everybody associated with them and the fantastic people who supported them, that their story will be remembered and that we will never ever repeat what happened in the awfulness and evil that violence was. Please God, we will never have to face it again. Said, perhaps there's more that I should say, but you will forgive me because it's warm and the man you've come to hear tonight is, as far as we Northerners are concerned, the one man who ended violence. The people in certain parts of Dublin and certain parts of the media don't always know that, but we who are Northerners certainly know who it was. And if you want to know who was trusted by every side, and who brought heads together, and who made the move so that it was possible for arms to be laid down, there's only one man. And of course also, he was from our beloved entertainment industry. So that makes him doubly proud. Will you welcome the former Taoiseach, but the wonderful man, Mr. Albert Reynolds.
I don't think there's any need for me to say. I think you can say it all. Except to say that I'm delighted to be here again tonight, and any proof that was ever needed about what the Miami means and what they did mean to Ireland, to the young people of Ireland, to the families of Ireland, and indeed to the next generation. It's answered here tonight. It'll be answered by this book, because when people want to hear what the real story was, they'll get the real story here. And what Father Brian has said, some of it is right. Don't mind the whole lot of it, but some of it is right. And, you know, as somebody who came from the music business and the showband business in the late 50s, early 60s, I grew up with the whole showband industry. And I did as much business in the north as I did in the south. That's how I got to know everybody. And as Brian rightly says, I never knew all the bands I used to employ from the north. I never knew what religion they were. As long as I could bring in a crowd, that was all right. And that's why when it came to, and I managed plenty of outside people in touring the north of Ireland at the time too, the likes of Ackerbilt, the likes of Kenny Ball, the likes of all of that in the early 60s. I'll tell you an interesting story. I was up in part of the north there only a couple of months ago, not too far away from Garbahy Road. This lady from I think it was the Mail in Belfast, rings me at home the following day and she says, Mr. Reynolds, I have 2 questions for you. I said, do you expect to get them answered? And she said, well, one of them I hope. I'm not fussy about the first one. And I says, right. She says, I want to find out from my family, she says, if my father is telling us lies, so all our family, since 1962. She says, would you remember 1962? Would you remember Portadown in 1962? I certainly would, says I. And I do. And I don't know what your father was telling you. He says that he always said that he saved your life in 1962, 2:30 in the morning in Portadown, on your way home to Longford from Belfast. And I said, yeah, and did he tell you where I was coming from? She said, no, he didn't. But I'll tell you where I was coming from. I had Kenny Ball playing for me in the Ulster Hall in Belfast. And I said, at the time there was no locks on the petrol tanks. And I says, when I came out from the Ulster Hall, 2 o'clock in the morning, my tank was almost empty. And I didn't notice it until I was halfway down to Portadown. And there was a fella tumbling a lift. And you're always told, certainly in that period, you don't carry anybody, don't lift anybody. If you're on your own, you have to take a chance. So I took it in. We made it to Portadown, and I says, you know anybody that'll give me petrol? He said, we'll go down to the RUC station. Well, I had a Longford registered car. At that time Mr. Brady from Longford was the leader of the Sinn Féin IRA. It wasn't the greatest one to have, but I said, well, I go down there anyway. So he came out and he brought me down. We got the petrol and I drove home. I was working with CIE in Longford at the time, but I used to be trying to do sideline bits and pieces, you know, with bands and stuff like that. Before we got the whole list of ballrooms in the early 60s and 80s. And consequently, I find out, so many years later, this was a daughter of the sergeant of the RUC in Portadown that filled me up, or got me filled up. That's why I say I had the greatest respect for everybody in the North of Ireland, and I still have. And that made it easy for me when, as a politician, I was asked well, the job that I took on was indeed that. And the way I managed to do the business with them up there over the years, I says, I'm going to try it the same way. After 3 months, 4 months, I made up my mind. There's only one way to do this. There's no point in talking, I'm sorry, no reflection on politicians or anybody up there. Politicians couldn't deliver anything. The war that was on up there, the people who were being shot every day, almost, all of that could only be stopped by the people that were doing it. So I decided to take my courage in my hands and go for it. And the first first people I spoke to was David Irvine, who died there not too long ago. David Irvine and Rusty Spence, and a few more of the leaders of that group. And on the other side, we sat down and we discussed it for everything. And the only way it was build the confidence and let them believe what you were saying and that you could deliver. So we sat down. Put a long story short, they said, look, don't talk to us about peace. If you can get the IRA to stop for 12 weeks, we'll give you a permanent peace. I said, I'll try. And I come back to you and I see how I'm doing. So I said, we're not talking politics, talking nothing except peace. Nothing else except peace. That's it. Right. So I went to the other side and I told them that I could get a peace deal with the other people, but they had to step up to the peace prize as well. And I said, well, what's the score? I said, not 12 weeks, we'll give you 10, we'll give you 6. So I said, you have to go first, 6 weeks for you. And after 6, the others will step up to the line. Nobody, and the one commitment I gave them was that I wouldn't speak to anybody on either side as to the deal I had done on both sides. And I said, I'm confident. And when they saw that nobody knew, but nobody knew, and it went on that way, the IRA went for 6 weeks, and the others came on the 13th of October, 6 weeks later. Consequently, they went on from there. No reflection on politicians. They could not deliver. They did not control the people that were indeed committing all the problems up there. So consequently, they did. And unfortunately, in the times that left, shortly after I left, the British government, as indeed history had shown for so long, they didn't keep their word. And consequently, the Canary War came, the peace broke down. Peace broke down because Sinn Féin were not brought into the talks as the British government had committed themselves to me. And consequently, when I told them that afterwards, and I told them until they were brought in, it would continue. So it did. But when there was a change of government, they were brought in, and consequently there was no more Canary Wharfs. Miami Showband chaps went through a very similar situation as other people had been done up there. They couldn't understand why it was being done. They weren't doing any harm to anybody. You were going up there enjoying yourselves and indeed making people enjoy themselves and indeed making a living for yourselves. There was as many, if not more, musicians coming down from the north making a good living here. And people up there decided they were going to stop that. They were going to cut out that sort of entertainment that was going on for whatever reasons, and I couldn't see what the end game was about trying to stop all of that going on, because people were getting to know each other and indeed enjoying themselves and understanding each other. But certain elements decided that that was not for them. So, as I say, Miami Showband paid a very dear price. A very dear price, and as Brian Darcy rightly says, 2 big blows to the entertainment industry, the one in a few days, one from the Royal Showband, a gentleman as well, and a couple of days later the Miami Showband. When you read that book, you will see and understand what those chaps went through. They couldn't believe, I'm quite certain, and I believe it, when I read it last night and kept on reading it until I finished it, couldn't believe as to why it should happen to them. What would they do to anybody except enjoying themselves and making a living? the sort of thinking that was in the north of Ireland at the time among a lot of people was totally different. It was very difficult to understand, very difficult to make sense of it. And consequently, as I said, eventually we got through. And indeed, people thought that peace was not possible, that it wasn't possible, that it wouldn't last. But I had come to the conclusion that a lot of people up there had begun to realise that there was a hell of a change, not alone in the Republic of Ireland down here, but in Europe as well. And that where their future lay for so long in London, that we were going way ahead because we went for Europe and they stayed with London. Consequently, they began to look to a different future. They saw where we came from in a short enough period. That's why you have peace. And that's why I'm convinced you're going to stay with peace, because they have to pick up on the grounds that they missed out for so long in the past. And that's where they're going to come up level with us. And indeed, when people talk about a united Ireland in the future, if you want to do the forecast for the next 15 years and on populations, you will see that in 15 years' time you'll be very close to one way or another. But what is important, and what most people, I don't think, realised at the time, that the section in the Downing Street Declaration that created the consent of the people to a change in our constitutional position lay with the people itself. They have to give the consent to what the change is. And for the first time, it was in the Downing Street Declaration, it was put over to the people. And the people indeed expressed their views on all that went on in recent years. And we're all delighted to see it. And indeed, let the people decide when it is. And no longer will it be left to the people with the guns and the bombs to indeed decide what the future of Ireland is going to be. Thank you very much.
Watching here tonight, a younger person with me said, "Who's your man?" Thank you very much for everybody coming down. I've been to a couple of these and expect people to bring their friends. I'm just going there. To bring their friends and some family, so I don't know who the hell the rest of you are, but thank you so much for showing up. This is not the book I said to write. When I approached Stephen, I had a whole different idea in mind. I thought it'd be very clever. I knew there was a story there. I thought I would write about Miami, and I approached him because he was part of it, and he had a much better idea. He said, "No, why don't you join me? I'm on a quest here to find the truth of what happened to me, and you should come along." And I said, "Nah, that's just not going to work." And then I thought about it a little bit longer, and I thought, this guy's onto something. I don't really know anything about it, but I just go along with the ride and see what happens. And I was quite happy to do it. It was a very nice journey. We started off, and he told me the whole story about the Miami. And then I remember I was in the car one day, and he said, "Look, Neil, it's very important we get it right." And I said, "Yeah, look, I'm a diligent journalist, so I'll get it right." "No, it's very important we get the Miami the lads right." And I said, "Yeah, we'll do that too." And I want to meet the people who killed them. And that's where it kind of went off a tangent for me. I had no idea, or no expectation that I was going to be in a room with people who murdered Stephen's friends. And that's where our path kind of went off in a tangent I'd never foreseen before, a very, very dark one, but one which has been a life-changing experience for me. And I just want to thank Stephen for that journey. Thank you so much. The thing about Stephen that first attracted me to Stephen's story was I read somewhere in the newspaper that he prayed for the men who killed his friends and almost killed him every night. He knelt, and still does as far as I know, at the end of his bed and prays for them. Who does that? Who can do that? If anybody here had been threatened, not only threatened, but had seen their friends going down on a dark country road, who could honestly say, hand on their heart, that they would pray for them? That is beyond me. It's something I still don't understand. And something that I probably never will be. But there's only one man who can try and explain that. That's Stephen Travers.
bass guitar on. There's nobody better to launch this book than Albert Reynolds. He has my utmost respect. He built the ballrooms and he built peace. And we're all very happy here tonight. There's a lot of musicians here tonight are very happy that Brian Darcy keeps his vow of silence because he knows more about us than anyone else. I want to thank everybody involved. There's so many people to thank, but Hodder and our agent, Father Grady, and everybody else. But there's I couldn't skip over without saying, paying tribute to the incredible bravery of Helen McCoy, Brian's wife, who's just an inspiration to all of us here. Neil Fetherstonhaugh is 20 years my junior, but I'm just astounded by his bravery because he accompanied me back to hell, and he's just a credit to his generation. We needed not just my voice, but somebody who could speak to the new Ireland as well. And so I'm eternally grateful to Neil. Also, to my wife and daughter who put up with me and my moods for the last 2 years. When I go into my office, happy dad, and come back out moody, I don't know what, but because we had to just immerse ourselves in this thing. I'm glad it's over. There are two questions that arise all the time, and tonight I've been asked them a number of times. One is, why did we decide to do it now at this stage? Why did we decide to write the book? Well, I was under an obligation to tell the story, because had these people been successful in planting the bomb, our names would have been, our families' names would have been vilified. We would have been put down as terrorists carrying bombs, and nobody would have known about the roadblock. So the reason that we wrote it is simply to fulfill our obligations to Tony, Fran and Brian. The other question, we have a great knack in Ireland of making a statement by asking a question. It's a rhetorical question. But so many times people say to me, how could they do that to innocent musicians? The truth is, we weren't innocent. We were the worst nightmare that these terrorists could ever imagine. We were part of an army made up of Catholics and Protestants, as Brian said, 600 bands crisscrossing the country all the time. We were armed to the teeth with Fenders and Gibsons and Ludwigs and Murray's Crazy Boxes and Vincent Ecker-Rex. I see Jim O'Connor nodding his head there, he knows all about that. We never lost a battle. Every night we absolutely annihilated the enemy. We had one common enemy, and that enemy was sectarianism. The bands stood on the stages and brought people together and introduced Catholics to Protestants and vice versa. And a young Catholic fella saw a young Protestant girl cross a ballroom and she didn't care. They didn't care what religion they were. I didn't know the religion of the lads in the band until I discovered later on, when they were well dead and buried, that they were either Catholics or Protestant. It never mattered, it doesn't matter. Every man or woman that ever stood on a stage in Northern Ireland, whether they were based up there or based down here, was a freedom fighter. Every one of them should hold their heads up high and look back to the generation that we came from and say that we did more for our country than any other army ever did in the history of this state. We should be very proud of it. I had the incredible honour and privilege to share the last few months, weeks, days, hours, minutes, even seconds of the lives of Tony, Fran and Brian. And it's an honour I wouldn't be without. I hope the book does them justice. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I'd just like to thank Some Good Communication, who does our publicity, and to Karen Butler and her team for hosting the event here this evening. The book is on sale. Stephen and Neil are going to sit and sign copies now. I'll just move the mic out of the way. Thank you.
Tomorrow with the Northern Secretary. 3 band members were killed in 1975 by the UVF. Relatives believe there was collusion between the British Army and the Loyalist paramilitary. A new book chronicling the tragic events of more than 30 years ago was published tonight. A packed house as family, friends, fans and colleagues gathered in Dublin tonight for the launch of a book to remember one of Ireland's most popular groups, the Miami Showband. 3 band members, Francis O'Toole, Anthony Gertie and Brian McCoy, were murdered by a UVF gang on the 31st of July 1975. Their minibus had been stopped at a false checkpoint near Newry. As the armed gang attempted to plant a bomb on the bus, it went off, killing 2 of the gunmen. The rest of the gang opened fire, killing the 3 musicians.
I owed it to my 3 friends, Tony, Fran and Brian, to tell the story, because after 30 years it becomes distorted and people get it wrong, so I wanted to put it on record exactly what happened, and I'm sure they did the same for me.
The widow of Brian McCoy says she'll never forget that morning.
I realised Brian wasn't home, and then I had to start ringing around to find out what was wrong, you know, because I didn't, we had to listen to the radio to find out. No one came to tell us, and there was a lot of confusion.
When the evening shadows fall.
Many of those in attendance tonight also have fond memories of the ballroom band.
Every night they played for me, I had a full house, and I could spend the next day counting my money. They were one of the best of their time.
When you know lads that get killed in such a dreadful way, it never leaves you. So even though they were a big band, when you met them, they were only just normal guys the same as the rest. That didn't really matter to us, you know.
3 men, some of whom were members of the Ulster Defence Regiment, were later convicted of the murders. An Oireachtas inquiry recently found that collusion between British security forces and loyalist paramilitaries was behind many of the atrocities in the 1970s, in which 18 people were killed. The issue will be raised at a meeting in Dublin tomorrow between Foreign Affairs Minister Dermot Ahern and the Northern Secretary Sean Woodward. Martina Fitzgerald, RTÉ News.